evening, everyone. Welcome to On the Couch. Could we have possibly hoped for more than what was dished up in week 1 of the 2022 final series? The Lions kicked us off with a come-from-behind upset. The Swans demonstrated the Bloods' culture in the most brutal and relentless fashion. Geelong and Collingwood smashed it out for over 2 hours in savage style, and the Dockers, well, they gave the Dogs a 41-point head start and reeled them in. Bring on week 2, if you don't mind. And I tell you what, late change. Thankfully, Jason Dunstall on Monday walks around here with a sub-vest, just in case. And he's got his big start out brown in. Jason Dunstall, welcome, Chief. Great to have you on the couch.
Thank you, Gary. As soon as I got the opportunity to work with Rui, I said, I'm coming in at any cost.
What a treat. It's always nice to work with your heroes, Gary.
That is true, and if one came in, we would, but Jason's here anyway, and it is good. What a joy. We were lucky. I know, Jace, you did Thursday night and Sunday. We did the two in between. They were
Saturday night.
Saturday night.
Yep.
They were 4 belters.
Oh, it was unbelievable. I can't imagine how exhausted you must have been as a genuine supporter of one of the clubs, whether your team won or lost, because we got to the end of the games that we covered and it was exhausting. It was so engaging. You got to the end and you were absolutely spent.
Can you ever remember a first week of finals like that? Because I can't. Normally there's a blowout in at least one of the games. I've never seen 4 pressure cookers like that.
If you missed it, here it is in all its glory.
All the players want to do is play finals. All we want to do is watch finals. This is the best teams on the biggest stage and the stars under the spotlight. That's what footy's all about.
Where else would you rather be than right here?
It was a huge contest.
The tackle by Coleman was the best out of the lot. Oh, no. Oh, it's a game-saving tackle, perhaps from Edwards.
Richmond just got it away, but got it to Walters. Walters kicks it goal. And can you believe what is happening at Optus?
Good build-up for the Demons. And can he find Fritsch? Committed to the mark.
This is tricky. He hasn't celebrated.
Ackley onto the boot. Got a clean snap. It's there.
Now here comes De Goey. Another one. Another one. From Geordie De Goey.
McRae goes long. Up goes Rock Smith. Oh, get a cape on him. Cameron's got out the back. Broad gets back. Defends it. But Cameron's on the ground as well. The kick over the shoulder.
Bontempelli found some space. Took the mark. Loaded up. Oh, the butt strikes early.
Fridge onto his favourite left boot. Lovely snap from the boundary. Jack Riewoldt lessens the angle a little. It's online. It's coming back. Has it got it? Is it touched? It's a goal.
Laconic. What about that?
Can he match what Johnson did in the other pocket at the other end a minute ago? He's going to go the regulation drop part. Have a look at that. It's like an arrow. It's touched off the boot. No mark. Off hands. Goal. Brisbane have kicked the goal. Danaher's got it.
Players out everywhere. Rowan Holmes. Goal.
Brisbane go through with an epic. They're into a prelim final.
The Cats are through to a prelim.
The Dockers have done it.
Whoever's been writing the scripts this weekend has done some sort of a job.
They have indeed, and the road to glory looks like this. If you're a Geelong supporter or a Sydney Swans supporter, you get to take breath and welcome either Collingwood and Fremantle or Melbourne and Brisbane, the 2 semi-finals that we're anticipating this weekend. So there it is, boys. We're down to 6. Jason Dunstall, 4-time premiership player. You've played in grand finals, Rui, drawn grand finals, the most recent, of course. Being at the game just was the starkest reminder of what separates home and away. A good old-fashioned home and away footy, which we love and we cover, and this is why reputations are made and teams are, glorified because of what we saw in that first week.
Yeah. So I think the thing that stands out the most is the heat clearly goes up, but it was the evaporation of time and space for players. That's what stood out to me. So we saw a pressure game like we haven't seen in a long time across. Well, the first final was a little bit different because it was a bit more of a shootout. But I thought the Friday night and then the Saturday afternoon games in particular, the absence of time and space for the players was stark.
And those 2 passages of play both happened down the same side of the ground with the same outcome, if you like, when you thought, in a normal situation, these blokes are out and home here.
Every time I see finals, the one thing that is confirmed in my mind, Gaz, is that we analyse games every week throughout the home and away season, don't we? And you look at the numbers, you look at the trends, and most of the time you get a good guide to the way games are going to unfold. Chuck that out the door right now. Come finals time, chuck it out the door. It's who can bring the pressure and who can handle the pressure when it's applied to you.
Well, it was pressure that we haven't seen in 2 years over the first weekend of games. And it's, again, the ability to apply it is one thing, but then it was the teams under pressure, the ability to be able to cope with it, and then the ability to actually, or having a system that stands up under the fiercest heat. And we'll get into Geelong and the fact that they've been able to sort of turn their game on their head and what that did for them in times when the pressure was at its greatest. But this is the missing link. And we had a bit of a chat this morning, Gaz, about teams that aren't there. Teams that aren't there competing at the moment. There's a reason why you're not.
We all acknowledge the toughness and length of the season and the rights for everyone to have a spell. But if you've been a part of a team that has been a non-performer, a non-finals winner for a long period of time, then it is almost incumbent upon you to at least present yourself to find out what it is you're missing out on and where you need to get to. Because you don't know what you don't know, Jason. If you weren't there on the weekend or you didn't sit back and watch this and experience it and you're a team that hasn't played finals, then I don't think you're doing your duty. So, you know, and Essendon have copped their heat because they've gone away, and I support the right for people to go and travel, but gee, I would love, if I'm an Essendon supporter, my boys to have sat there on Friday night or on Saturday and gone, sheesh, this is where we've got to get to. And not only Essendon, by the way.
Yeah, well, because there are a lot of teams that missed out that were nowhere near that sort of intensity throughout the year. And so your point is great, because when you haven't been there, or you're a young player, or you haven't played finals throughout your career, you don't know what you don't know. So to actually go along on the Friday night or on the Saturday afternoon at the MCG in Melbourne for the Melbourne-based clubs, you would have felt it. It jumped off the ground and smacked you in the face. And I can't really recall an act or a moment in either of those two games where I thought, oh, that player could have gone harder, or that player could have chased more, or he could have tackled with greater intensity. There were none of those moments. And so those teams clearly have practiced it. They've trained it all year, because you can't just flick the switch. So it would have been great for those clubs to have gone along. Grant Thomas did it with us in 2002. There was no footy trip. He said, you boys are going to the finals and you're going to watch what it's all about. You're going to learn.
So it's a twofold thing. I mean, I support everyone's right to go away on holidays, because they only get a certain amount of time off. So it's more the timing, I think, that is probably in question here, not the fact that they've actually gone away. But you know what? If I'm going to those games, the thing that I pick up the most, Gaz, and they're like gold nuggets, look at the players who don't fumble. That can handle the ball cleanly when the heat's on. They are just... You can count them on one hand at times when it gets hot.
And this is where you judge footy players.
100%.
This is where reputations get made. So round 11 and, you know, the game's not that intense and it's rolling along and you've got 36 possessions and 28 uncontested. Well, it's going to read well. You might pick up 3 Brownlow votes, or you can be Lachie Neale on Thursday night and walk out there and drag your team across the line. You talk about not fumbling, you talk about clean, talk about start to finish, putting a team on your back. And this is what it's about. And it's the obvious highlight from this match. But without Lachie Neale, their season's gone.
Which was different from the others in terms of the pressure.
This is more of a
This was a shootout. There was time and space for players, and the ball did zing around a little bit more in an uncontested manner.
So if that's the case, Rui, is it an error from Richmond's coaches not to put time into Lachie Neale and to take away that time and space? Because 15 clearances, you're right. I mean, not that his reputation needed enhancing, Gaz, but... should they have put work into it?
Well, we're assuming they didn't. Or maybe they did and it just...
Geez, if they did, some bloke didn't do a good job and should have been rolled over at some stage.
Maybe that's the case.
Well, for me, anyway, your answer is the greatest no-brainer of all. Because he's been got before. When I say he's been got, he's been influenced.
He's been quelled.
It's happened before. And, you know, in terms of influence on this side, more than anyone, more than any player. So... anyway, they would say, hey, we were in the contest right up until...
Lost by a kick.
Lost by a kick. Yeah. The counter-argument is, well, you may have been that far further in the contest had you gone to him. So that was interesting.
Well, what about the Sydney-Melbourne game? Because it looked at, like, various stages like Melbourne were going to go. And they got to 2 goals. It looked like, OK, here they go, they're flexing their muscles. But they needed an igniter.
They did. And I thought it was Papley. I mean, he's working that first half. And it was on the back of the May and Buddy sort of little spark that got it going. And then and this little bloke, he just got into their heads. He got into Paris and Petty's face at one stage. Look at him. He was an emotional spark and they didn't really need it because they were turning up, but they weren't being able to hit the scoreboard. And then all of a sudden he went bang. So Papley for me was the one. You can talk about May Buddy later, Chief. I know you love that match-up as well.
Well, that's why they needed Papley to do that, because Stephen May played one of the best games I've seen for a long time. But does anyone celebrate a goal better than Tom Papley?
No, good on him, because it's just great. And it gets up the nose of the opposition.
There was cream on his performance. He was awesome.
Don't think we're not going to recognise some of the other individuals. We're just picking these ones out. Gary Rowan, I know you want to talk about him, Jace.
Well, he's been criticised at different stages, hasn't he, about not having enough of an impact. Maybe not getting the number of possessions you want. But if you're going to have moments like these, you don't have to play a great game, Gaz. But if you can get a couple of critical possessions or take that big mark and kick the goal that counts, that can turn a final.
I thought Chris Scott handled the criticism of him perfectly last week, of Gary Rowan, because a lot of people came from him and Chris Scott said, well, why are we focusing on Gary Rowan? Because he's 15th player on our list, potentially. So what are we judging him on? Well, if he's a bottom six player for Geelong and the bottom six are delivering what he did on the weekend, no wonder they're in such good shape.
I love how they got around him.
Yeah, it was great.
But I reckon, hate and the haters can... I don't think it's hate. I mean, he has had some games in finals.
He looked like Wayne Carey when he took that grab.
The mark and the kick. And he was more than that. So I was thrilled for him as well. Then you go to the Fremantle game and they're getting their pants pulled down. Brayshaw is keeping them in it.
Yep.
And then Sarong takes them to where they need to go.
Which he was the guy that got it done in round 23 as well, when they had a top 4 spot up for grabs and they needed to win that game. So it was Sarong in the second half, both 2 weeks in a row. And how exciting for this Fremantle Football Club that you've had the experience of Fife and these guys. It's the new age. And they think they're great internally, Brayshaw and Sarong. And the rest of the footy world, I think, has probably been a little bit slow to recognise the greatness. But when they do it on that stage for us all to see, well, then you go, OK, we see it. They're great. We know you guys have been riding this train for a while and they're super young players. Quarter
time and early into the second quarter, I was feeling for Justin Longmuir because he's sitting there watching a team that nothing has gone right for. No one's playing at the level they probably should be playing at. The bounce of the ball, the freak, you name it, everything went wrong. But then these two went to work and they just picked that team up. And I was super impressed because of the lack of experience in these two players. I was really keen to watch Andrew Brayshaw because he's the MVP, which is great during the home and away season. And, you just go about your business and he's over in the West. No one really takes much notice. Hey, on the big stage of finals, you do.
And that's why you've got to get your house in order as a team, because these players want to play finals. They want to be able to do what Andrew Brayshaw and Caleb Sarong did. You can't be a big game finals performer if you're not there. And they got so it's incumbent upon St Kilda to get their house, and every club to get their house in order to provide their players. Otherwise, they'll move. Bontempelli was the other one, and it was an interesting study, I know. His first quarter or first half continued on a run of finals footy in the past 3 games or so that has just been crazy. Look at this. His finals record and game rating in his last 5 outings suggests that suggests everything that we know about him. It dried up a bit post-game. It dried up, post-game. Post-half-time. Post-half-time in the grand final. How much responsibility does he take in terms of that? I know you're a bit of a harder marker.
Well, no, it's just... So, when you're the captain and the tide's moving against you, so second half last year in the grand final, the way Melbourne were able to walk out of centre bounce, we looked at some clips last year of Liberatore and Bontempelli getting sucked in, and so second half again. So, does he need more soldiers or different types of soldiers around him,
I think that,
when the tide's moving against him, so that he can continue to do what he does and whack away? Or is he responsible for stemming the tide?
I think
that's the question I think they need to answer, because they've got a lot of forward runners in that midfield.
You can't do it on your own.
Balance, isn't it? Yeah. Balance. No Liberatore there hurt.
Big time.
Big time.
Absolutely did.
We've got we've got a heap of players that we want to celebrate throughout the course of our show. We'll take a break. We'll concentrate on the two teams that are in the prelim. The Cats were absolutely superb. Collingwood lost no fans in a qualifying final for the ages. And the Sydney Swans, well, they do what the Sydney Swans have been doing for a long, long time. They turn up, they give their all. They've got a weekend off and they're playing for a spot in the grand final. Welcome back. The MCG was rocking 91,000 plus, and Geelong did what few teams have been able to do this year. They've beaten Collingwood in a close game. It was unbelievable. That man, Jeremy Cameron, you talk about individual performances in finals. It was superb. Chris Scott planted this seed very early on in the season, and they're through to a prelim. They're in the box seat right now. It was a joy to be there and to watch it, and they did it the hard way because Collingwood, to all intents and purposes, jumped them in the first quarter. Well, when I say jumped them, they had it on their terms.
Yeah, well, it played out in a similar fashion to the way a lot of Geelong's finals have started, where Geelong just couldn't find a way to hit the scoreboard. So you're sitting there sort of halfway through the first quarter and you think, geez, I thought the Cats were going to be different than this in the first. It didn't.
That was more about Collingwood than
yeah. I think so. Well, certainly in retrospect, but at the time, you know, it was what's going on with Geelong? I thought this was going to be a little bit different, and they weren't. They were going to come out and you know, be a bit more potent with the ball in hand. But the pressure just, I think, overwhelmed them to begin with.
Jace, there's a couple of examples. It's great to have Jace. I've got to say this: a very late call up. So he's doing the rundown on the run, but he's a consummate professional. This stat bobbed up a couple of times over the weekend. We'll talk about it in Sydney and Melbourne. The contested possession, the comparison of contested possession to uncontested possession. Yep. And everyone gets obsessed with contested possession because it's a great barometer. Early on in the piece, this is what Collingwood were doing to Geelong. It was all in close. They had no capacity to get it to the outside, no capacity to transition footy.
And no ability to win some easy uncontested ball. So see this here. So more contested possessions than uncontested possessions in the first quarter never happens. Yeah. So the only time it might happen is if you're playing in a bog, like a torrential downpour.
So it's generally, our stat, when he tells us, it's about 70-30 comparison, if you want to know a figure. So that there, you look at it and go, there's pressure and heat, OK? How do they handle this? Do they go back and try and control the contest, which has been their way for a number of years?
Well, this is the point, I think, with Geelong, is we know Geelong have kept finding more ways to go all in as a football club through their recruiting, through their coaching, and more recently through their game style. And so Chris Scott at the start of the year, he said, we're going to tinker. We're going to overhaul the game style because in the highest pressure, highest leverage moments, the control style of game where they go possess, it's let them down. So they blow it up, and then on the weekend, I think was a great example because you look at the uncontested mark, the control game, they didn't flinch.
This is what happened in the prelim.
That's right. In the prelim,
exactly what you're talking
the control game was taken away from them, and they got belted to the tune of 83 points when they were under pressure early in the game. And you think, will they revert back? They didn't flinch.
Well, for an example, it's as good. That's like you've sort of made that up for the argument. But the exact same number of uncontested marks, and there's the contrast in the margin. So against Melbourne, they go back to it. It doesn't work. Melbourne squeeze up on them, turn the footy over, bang and score. But this time they go, no, let's go. They didn't transition the footy in the first half from defensive 50 to inside 50. So we're talking about moving the ball. It was zero. They didn't do it once.
So, a lot of it's to do with methodology with the ball, though, isn't it? And we've seen them overwhelm teams in home and away contests for years and upon years, and they just do it so easily, don't they? But all of a sudden now, when they need to take a risk, they can. But it helps when you've got players up forward that can impact a game, doesn't it?
But that's right. But this here says, so they transition 0%, yet they stuck at it and kicked 3 or 4 goals from the back half in the last quarter. Because they play brave.
Yeah, that's right. So it showed a lot of moxie for the group to not revert back to ways of the past. So this was 12 months in the making, and it was designed for that type of game. When opposition bring the ultimate heat, which Collingwood did, credit to them, Geelong still found a way, and it took Geelong to do what no other club has been able to do to the Pies. So big tick for Chris Scott.
Talk to us about Jeremy Cameron, who's been well found as a player, as someone that's been able to change the way he plays to a degree. I thought in that first quarter when they couldn't get their hands on it, when there was no uncontested ball to be won, he stood out like a beacon.
They brought him to a club for a reason, didn't they? Because he can make things happen. He's got the mobility to push up the ground, to run back with it. We're even starting to see him taking contested marks in the air, which we haven't seen for a long, long time. Such is the confidence growing within the Geelong makeup. But what made it even more important was the fact that Darcy Moore did such a good job on Tom Hawkins. Yeah. They needed someone to carry the load. And even when it wasn't going right for them, He kicked the first goal that got them going, kicked a couple of goals just to keep them within touch.
He's had games throughout his career when it's almost like he's waited for the game to come to him, but he went to it, which as a high, like a centre-half forward, that's the job, and he did it so well. He didn't wait, he didn't sit back, he went and found the ball rather than waiting for it to come to him. It was a great performance.
We loved it. And the way that the Cats changed their style, changed their coaches, changed the way they go about it, but also changed their profile of their list, and they've gone back to saying, listen, we need some athletes, we need some runners. We told the story 6 weeks ago about on draft night, how they particularly wanted to get home, so they traded on draft night to get up. Here's Chris Scott post-game.
One thing we've added to our team, you know, over the last period of time is some guys that are not only dangerous ahead of the ball, but they can really run. You know, they're elite runners of the competition, and you know that helps us on both sides of the ball.
And that's why Geelong is such a good football club, because they
identify the need.
That's right. So your left hand knows what the right hand is doing. So recruiting know the way coaching want to play, and they relay the message, and they go out and target the players, and you stick them out on a wing, hold your width, and these blokes just run up and down the wing all day. It was awesome.
So draft night, there's the story. So we'll have a look at what the result is. They go, this is what, when they go, OK, let's trade into the first round on draft night because we need a runner. OK, who have you got in mind? Oh, I reckon this kid Holmes is an athlete. I reckon there's an upside. This is the payoff when it matters most. So Ginnivan goes to the contest. Holmes reading the ball, reading the play, and you know, and as you heard from Chris Scott, we want players who are able to run from one end of the ground to the other. And Holmes at a critical time, times his run, gets from one end and helps Gary growing out.
But what it does, Gaz, if you've got speed and endurance, that creates options around the ground. So that then allows them to be a bit braver with the movement of the football, knowing they've got people that are going to cover the ground and probably cover it better than the opposition.
So last quarter, they have outscored opposition final quarters by 218 points.
Yeah.
So run, fit, athletes.
Yeah, so who else, though? Because it's not just the athletes, because in that sort of game when it's contested, it's hot, and a lot of it's on the inside to get it to the outside. Who's the man getting it done for?
Right, this is my winner of the week, Tom Atkins. I thought Tom Atkins has done this throughout the season, and he did it again in the last quarter when it needed to be done, right? So the numbers here, you go, wow, all game highs, how good is that? They've trailed Geelong 3 times at three-quarter time in the back half of this season, 3 times. In all 3 games, Tom Atkins has been the 2nd highest rated player in their comeback in the last quarter, the 2nd highest rated player, and the 5th highest rated player. That's Selwood stuff, right? And Selwood, by the way, we'll get to him in a moment.
Yeah.
But he did it in the home and away when they needed him, and then in the first final, that performance there was just crazy good.
Yeah,
I loved it.
It's the growth of Geelong, isn't it?
So that's how you reinvent yourself as a footy team. You can't keep relying on the same players because they get weary dragging the team along. And there are a lot of people talking about how stiff Parfitt was, actually losing out on the spot. Tom Atkins isn't a celebrated player, but he's elevated himself to a high-quality player, and he's now starting to take the load. And what's more, when you see Chris Scott put Danger on the bench and Selwood on the bench to start every quarter, which I can guarantee you they don't want to do, Gaz, because that is that's a big slap to the face in terms of your pride, isn't it? It's because they've got the confidence in these guys to get the job done.
And when they don't like it, which is competitors you don't, and we spoke to Danger post-game and he had this funny ride look, and he didn't like it, you just go, hey, Exhibit A is Tom Atkins' number. Hey? So there you go.
Do you want to win a flag? Yes.
Collingwood lost no fans.
No, they didn't. So you can give great effort, but it doesn't always guarantee the result. Now, for Collingwood, it has guaranteed the result because they've just found a way to win and to win and to win from the most unlikely scenarios. So they lose the game, but they lost no fans. They went forward as a group. It was an awesome performance from Collingwood. And those are the games where it's a shame someone has to walk away feeling as dejected as they did, because they were fantastic.
All the great things that we've admired about Collingwood were on display. The things that have emerged throughout the course of the season, which we go, so the Dacos emergence, who's the NAB rising star, who has a great home and away season, you go, OK, can he do it in final series? Well, when the heat's on and there's pressure on, ball in hand, he's as good as anyone again.
So composed late, Gaz.
So this stuff, this is all late.
Yeah, this is all last quarter where it's like, look at this little deft kick here. Do you see how well Geelong is set up behind the footy? They're banking on the pressure, making a player just bomb the ball long. So he's the one that was able to split it open, find the little gap. That's the reason De Goey gets on the end of it.
You can't teach decision-making, can you? You've either got it or you haven't. And if you've got a few players like that can get the ball when they need it, you're half a chance.
It drives you nuts.
Do you know what the funny thing was about Collingwood, though? We're so used to them coming from behind and winning games. This was a different look for them. Getting out in front and trying to hang on. And you've got to say they gave it a damn good try. So I'm with you. I don't think they lost any admirers. That was stiff.
None.
Darcy Moore was brilliant.
Oh,
so coming into the game, he was a player that at various stages this year, you look at him and his greatest strength can be his greatest weakness in that he tries to read it and he rolls off. Well, Tom Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron loomed large, and I thought if he gets it wrong today, he could be made to look not silly, but he could be made to look like second-rate almost. Well, he just took the game over, particularly early when there was pressure on the ball. It was hack kick, it was getting rushed forward. His positioning, his anticipation and his ability to complete his plays was a big part of the reason they jumped out of the blocks.
Loved it, and I'll tell you what else I loved. I love what Craig McRae had to say post-game.
Well, we want to act like winners. I must admit, the siren goes and there's half a dozen of our guys laying on the ground. For me, that's not a winner. That's acting like a loser. We lost the game. We're not losers.
I just can't say how much I loved it. I was doing radio today. Some people out there didn't, which is fair enough.
Why? For what reason?
The emotional side of it.
Yeah.
The players are emotional. They've given their all. Why have a go at them?
But I think it was for the players.
It's a steal.
It's for the players because it's the hard edge, and it's like, hey, there's no straight sets for us, boys.
No.
Exactly.
We are winners, and they were winners in the sense that they gave themselves every opportunity through giving unconditional effort, and sometimes there are just no guarantees.
Sydney Friday night was almost, it's hard to say, given some of these performances, the best of the lot. Their willingness to pressure the opposition, and we talked about the contested, uncontested possession. Melbourne pride themselves on being a side that stand up and deliver this sort of stuff to the opposition. Well, not for the first time the Swans have stared them down. They stared Melbourne down and Melbourne weren't disgraceful. You can't, if you're a Demon supporter, there's some disappointing stuff that you walk away from, but not effort. But they just got stared down by a side who were better at it.
Isn't this their core business, though? How long have we been talking about Sydney playing this brand of football and knowing that it works, and they continue to bring it?
They lost a little bit of it halfway through the year, and we talked about it here on this show.
Their contest and clearance stuff disappeared for them, and so about 6 rounds to go, that was the question mark on Sydney is can they rectify the contest and clearance part of the game, in particular the contest, which we know, we've looked at the numbers so far from the first round of finals, how important that part of the game is. They fixed it in the last 6 weeks, so they came in with no holes in their game whatsoever. But it still takes that buy-in defensively from players that you wouldn't necessarily have expected it from, say, 12 months ago. Like, I look at a player like Nick Blakey and the desperation he shows now defensively. I think you encapsulate. He encapsulates the rest of the team in the way they go about it.
What about their back six? You went through it.
Yeah, so Rampy, rookie, Lloyd, rookie, Paddy McCartan's now a rookie, Tom McCartan recruited as a forward, Robbie Fox,
Lloyd,
a rookie, Lloyd, I said. Who else is on the back flank?
Blakey's gone as a forward
Blakey
back.
recruited as a forward to back, so it's a makeshift back six, really.
God,
and they didn't look like getting scored against.
There was no room for Melbourne. We'll get to Melbourne in terms of whether they can handle it.
Just quick one on. So we spoke to Tom Hickey after the game, and a guy that's been at 4 clubs, and asked him what talk to us about the Bloods culture, because he's been at 4 clubs. He's probably as well positioned as anyone to talk about the difference. And he just said it's just the people,
the care.
It's the people and the care. So in an industry where footy clubs are so transient and people come and go, how do you maintain the culture for so long through so many different sort of eras of people? I think John Longmire as a constant in the
exactly
leadership
right.
with
you have standards. You have standards, and it's the leaders that make sure anyone coming into the system adheres to those standards. And if you don't, take a hike.
So there is still room for strong, hard edge accountability in the game.
Of course there is. Of course there is.
So we talk, and everyone will celebrate their hardness and their spirit and their toughness and their whatever many tackles last. All that stuff is great, but then there's some nuance to it as well. Just pick this up from Warner. This man on the mark thing has been in here long enough now. He's got this down pat. Just to hold and wait for the bloke to get past, and then the next kick goes to someone that Warner's not able to get the kick to. It happens again here. Holds up, waits. Just you can't move the man on the mark. And again, this should have been marked. Loved it. I just think it's something that he's worked into his game. And the fact is that they have won that big final with no input from Buddy. Chad Warner, who's been in brilliant touch, was just... Heaney was just okay.
Yeah.
Upside for the Swans. An upside on the back of that sort of game. Brownie wanted to talk about Tom McCartan. So, Chief, you can talk about him on Brownie's behalf. I don't know whether you like him or not, but you're going to have to...
Star, mate.
He's defensive. For a young defender who takes the opposition's best forward week in, week out, he has been superb.
And found himself when he started on Max Gawn. So giving away an enormous advantage there. But you're right, he's just gone about his business, and he's another one that doesn't seem to get the kudos that a lot of the other key defenders in the competition get. But that's kind of the Sydney way, isn't it?
Yeah,
Go about your business, do it every week, and then we move on. And we don't talk too much about it. We don't worry too much about it.
Incredible athlete.
You could count on one hand the number of times he's been beaten this year.
We were sitting up in the goals, so behind the goals, up high, great vision. And so that defensive stuff, Rampy's work on Ben Brown off the footy was... people go, oh, Ben Brown didn't get it. Rampy's defensive work was just crazy.
He's one of the hardest guys in the competition to get a kick on. Because he just... If the ball's 100 metres away, he acts like it's a metre away. He does not let up. He's one of the great competitors in the competition.
Interesting challenge for him, just before we move on. When he had Fritsch, it was a different kettle of fish. And Fritsch's movement and ability to lead at the footy and attack it and find different angles to approach the footy actually troubled him a bit.
Hey, don't ever underestimate what happened at Optus Stadium either. From a Fremantle point of view, for the club, where they're at as a footy club, been over there last year, they're so proud. They think they were in a space where they're happy. They think they got the right coach. And for them to make finals was a tick. But 41 points down, it can sometimes be worse.
Well, they were staring down the barrel of a performance in a negative sense, like Port Adelaide had in the prelim at home last year, that it felt like it lingered up until round 5 this year for the Power. So Fremantle was staring down the barrel of that, and then their game got going. So the speed kicked in, and that's I think been one of the real assets of Fremantle so far this year is their high half forwards. They get up the ground and then they just burn you on the way back. So they play a really athletic style in the front half.
This bloke's really important to it too.
Kowski, absolutely.
And it ends up not quite getting there with Schultz, but Frederick. And when they're at their best, they're so hard to score against. And then the X factor was their ability to cover and spread like this. And we've already spoken about their two young leaders. You've got Luke Ryan in the back half who's getting it done. Lobbs stepped up when he needed to step up, and a bit of a forgotten man, Michael Walters.
Well, that's the best game he's played, I reckon, for some time for the Dockers. And when they needed him, he was clean and he hit the scoreboard. And I mean, the difference between kicking a couple of goals, kicking a couple of points, turns an average game into a good game, doesn't it? Making good decisions, and he's the type of character that lifts all those players around him when he's doing these sorts of things.
It was an amazing comeback. It felt like at 41 points down, it only took sort of 2 or 3 goals for you to feel like they were back in the game.
But they didn't look like they were ever coming.
No, they didn't. But then the crowd, on the back of 2 goals, it was like it was within a kick. The crowd was so up and about.
So the Bulldogs, this is a grand finalist. So they got into the finals courtesy of, the unbelievable results here.
That says it all, Gaz.
You can't be something you're not, right? So a rating, those 200+ ratings are great, but it's not. It doesn't come naturally for them.
Well,
so
but if you can do it for a half, why can't you do it for 3/4 or a whole game?
Because I think it takes something away from what...
It's not meant to be easy. It's a bloody final,
but
really.
It's hard, but they are who they are, Jace. They are who they are.
But they've shown they can do it.
Yeah, well, when the whips were cracking and the game was at its most important in the last quarter, they delivered 149 pressure rating.
That's either attitudinal or physical. Well, which is it? Identify which and address it.
Well, I think it's probably a combination of both. And the issues that they had all year, particularly defensively, well, they came home to roost in the second half of this game, and they again. I mean, I think that's probably where they're at, right? They're an eighth.
Couldn't defend. 14
for
trying to defend footy inside 50, so that's got to get tidied up. We know who's coming their way. We know Sam Darcy's going to be the player. Rory Lobb get there. Gee, they're going to be big, and so it's an interesting sort of profile of their list.
I'd love to see their round 1 team positionally now, because like Norton, Darcy, one of those guys is going to have to go back.
And Lobb, can you play 3 of those in the forward line? You probably can't.
With Hugo Hagan, it's going to be interesting.
It will be, but we'll worry about that at the end of the year, because we've got lots to look forward to, including a preliminary final between a semi-final between the Brisbane Lions and the Demons 2 weeks after this, if you don't mind. So come back to the MCG. Stare across the line and see whether the Lions can do what they haven't been able to do in recent times. They come up against the Brisbane Lions now in a game that's going to be great for all sorts of reasons, but couldn't get the job done against Sydney. And you're disappointed to lose. You're disappointed in... I know Simon Goodwin was disappointed with some of the discipline aspects of the way they went about it. But the contested footy stuff we talked about earlier, contested possession compared to uncontested possession, they had no room to breathe. Yeah. It was 1-1 for the whole game. Geelong was 1-1 for a quarter. Yeah. This was 1-1 for a whole game of footy, which is a testament to the Sydney Swans. Didn't allow them to get out into any space. You know, their inside 50 stuff's been problematic for much of the year, so they never really got the chance to set anything up. Early in the piece, they found a few on a lead, which Spargo was on the back of, but there's other problems that have snuck into this Melbourne side that they've got to address and address really quickly.
Well, we just said about the Western Bulldogs, you are who you are, and I think there's been a bit of a feeling that Melbourne, just come finals time, they'll be right. They'll be right come finals time. And so application, massive tick for Melbourne, for both sides. This was one of the great contests that we've seen. But just some of the issues that they've had where they've won 6 of their last 13 games, 6 and 7 over the last 13 games to finish the regular season. They were there again. They were there again, that's right. So the other top 4 teams have all been on absolute hot streaks, and the Demons have come in with some issues, and one of those in particular has been their ball movement. And so they were completely stifled by a red-hot Sydney pressure team.
But I think the reason we had confidence about the D's is because they go to round 23 and they get their bunnies and they give them a slap, don't they, in Brisbane? And we think, oh, everything's OK. They're playing great footy. They've just beaten one of the other top teams. So we think they'll take that into the finals. But they came up against a different outfit in Sydney. Now they go back to Brisbane. What have Brisbane learned? Well,
that round 23 game where Melbourne's ball used to look great, I think it probably said more about Brisbane's inability to defend rather than Melbourne fixing that part of their game. You still got to do what you do. But Melbourne are a team that, you know, at times this year they've needed to bash you to beat you. And they came up against a Sydney team that was, you know, they were ready for a fight, and they landed a lot of blows. It was, you know, it was 2 teams just going at it. Yeah,
so that's right. And so whilst they haven't always looked the sexiest side from a scoring point of view, their midfield is, you know, generational, I say, and their defence has been nigh on impossible to score against. The defence is the aspect right now that they've got a big issue with. So they gave up 91 points here, they gave up 96 points against Collingwood, they gave up 91 points against Geelong. That hardly happened last year. Like, they hardly gave up 90-plus points for the year. It might have happened once last year. So this is the issue that's now becoming a bit more of a problem and they've got to deal with. In the finals last year, 60 against Brisbane, 42 against Geelong and 66 against the Bulldogs. They gave up 91 against the Swans.
And I think a bit of it is Melbourne's ball use creates the issue defensively, because when they played Sydney in round 12, the ball use killed them and they got smashed in the turnover game. And then again on the weekend, it was the turnover game where Sydney were able to dominate. So I think one part of the game, their use with the footy will actually help them defensively. So this is going to be a really interesting game, guys, because of what's transpired in recent history between these two. Put your coach's hat on. You've always fancied yourself as a coach. You've got a good international record as coach of Australia. We ruined that in 2004. Didn't we? Got Belgium in
the team. So you're Chris Fagan, and we know how antsy he got in the lead up to how bad their finals record was. He's going to cop the same questions about you've been beaten up physically. How do you tell your players to handle it? Is it just... I'm thinking just head over ball. Don't try and do that fake bravado stuff that we saw from them last time around, because A, it's not their game, and B, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this stuff, in the lead up to this game, it was such a focus that they went over the top and they tried to be something they're not, right? So their biggest issue is moving the footy. So they're not probably never going to out-tough Melbourne anyway. Not this year. They might make an adjustment over the summer, but they're not going to win this battle. So let's talk about what the other part that they can really control, and that's the way they move their footy. Now, there were signs against Richmond where they were braver and more inclined to go back through the middle of the ground, take the corridor on. That's the sort of stuff they're going to have to take on against Melbourne.
Is that what they do? Because right now, you can't really become something that you're not in the space of a week.
That's my point. Against a side that are that naturally anyway, this is where they'll get Melbourne if they're prepared to be brave. not bomb away long down the line and give the May and the Levers of the world the look.
Well, they've been one of the highest scoring teams of the competition all year for a reason. It's because they're potent with the footy and they've got some really exciting players in front of the football. So I think that's it. I think that's the ticket. You've got to back yourself in to kick over 100 points and hope that Melbourne can't do the same.
But you won't kick over 100 points if you are bombing it in, Gaz. And they fall into that trap because they've got so many tall forwards.
Yeah.
And they just wave the ball long. McStay and Danaher, you get a ruckman pushing forward, you've got Hipwood, you've got McCarthy who can take a big mark. They've got to separate, divide and conquer the Melbourne defence.
So have a look at this then, Jace, to this point. And again, you're off the bench late, so this is why you know your footy so well. So the Hibberd-Cameron matchup for the last 2 outings, in terms of how often they went to Charlie Cameron, it was like they deliberately ignored him. And kept going to the area where Melbourne are strongest, in the air. And instead, look at this. Look how many times he was actually targeted.
The last 2 times they've played against
twice
the D's.
in 2 games.
I think a bit of that's on Charlie too. So last week against Nathan Broad, who's an opponent that's much better suited in the aerial contest against Charlie. Get him up and beat him back. Get him up and turn him around. And I think that's the way Charlie Cameron needs to approach the Hibberd matchup. It was interesting you just said they look too big with the 3 talls. So McInerney going down early, you never want to lose a player early, particularly. I think it might have helped.
A blessing in disguise, mate.
I think it might have helped.
You know what else it does? It helped both Danaher and McStay. I mean, McStay did most of it, Danaher did a bit, because it got him involved in the game. Sometimes when you're sitting forward and you're up against a good defence, you don't get that many opportunities. But when you're running around the ground, and really the ruckmen don't play that close together on each other, you get your confidence up, Gaz. And for McStay, I reckon it was fantastic.
Do you reckon Fague saw it that way, Gaz?
No, because we'll hear from him in a moment. But they're coming up against the 1-2 punch that is Gordon Jackson.
That's the issue.
So
you are coming up against an unbelievable ruck duo. But
we'll hear from Fags in a moment. So it's just about what he will do and what he's already put on the table. From a Richmond point of view, have we fallen into the trap of, you talked about, Jace, you talked about Melbourne, there was a suspicion that come finals everything had fallen into place. Have we been doing that with Richmond for 2 years? Like, every time that they can win the premiership still. You know, and if they had won those close... Well, they didn't win the close ones. They didn't play finals last year, and they're out already this year. Yet I'm listening to the narrative, and I can understand it because they've been such a great club, but for 2 years now they haven't won a final series, didn't play last year. I mean, have we been a bit generous in terms of the Tigers?
Yeah, I think it depends the lens you want to cast over it. So they lost their last 5 losses of the year were all under a goal.
Yeah, they were all losses.
Yeah, I understand that.
This is my point.
But I mean, Geelong, we were saying before that Carlton lost on the weekend, but they went forward as a group. So they weren't really losers.
Well, yeah, 8-2 at round 10, and they didn't play finals, so I'm not sure whether that's going forward. But just interesting. So all of a sudden, Lambert's not going to be there. You know, they've got key players that have, been part of this dynasty. I think it's a really interesting time.
No doubt their defensive struggles again. That's what has cost them their season in the end, because they concede over 100 points. They've been the 9th best team this year.
You'd back them into
losing Grimes doesn't help.
Doesn't help.
I mean, he's your premier defender.
I'm still bullish on their ability to stay relevant.
I've admired you've stayed in the camp strongly, and I've been a great admirer.
Yeah, the AFL are lucky that the rest of the round was so good, and we're not talking about the Arc.
That's right. Yeah. We haven't mentioned it once.
Haven't mentioned it once.
Dimmer might bring it up when he's on AFL 360.
I reckon he might. We're going to talk about Fags with what they're going to do with Brisbane.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's have a listen what they're going to do from a ruck point of view.
I thanked our recruiting manager just then after the game for getting Darcy Ford to the club last year, because we're certainly going to need him next week. Oscar, it was pretty clear as soon as I looked at him, I thought, he's in a bit of trouble here. So yes, Darcy won't play in the reserves this weekend. We'll keep him in cotton wool and play him next week. We'll probably gone a few times, and our players could easily have got disappointed with the Oscar injury so early in the game. I mean, it's a pretty massive blow. He's an important player to us, and we lost Dan McStay early in the first final last year, and I felt like that affected us mentally. And it was something that we talked about during the pre-season, and tonight that didn't affect us mentally. The boys kept playing.
So there you go. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Great scenes too after the game with Fags.
Great scenes.
Awesome.
How pumped were they? That's a team who are very much on the same page. Johnny Ralph joins us. It's a very busy news time, Ralphie.
Yeah, and the trade market is in a frenzy right now, especially tonight. So Collingwood will put a 4-year deal to Jordan De Goey as early as next week, as soon as they bow out of the finals. That will pay him $800,000 a year, as long as he can keep out of trouble. So the deal would be the same one withdrawn through the Bali escapades. 2 years guaranteed, and then 2 more years if he meets those strict behavioural criteria. He won't get more than $800,000 at Collingwood, but he's desperate to stay, and critically the Collingwood board now has ticked it off. Very keen for him to be there as long as those clauses are there. St Kilda's still circling. Now Collingwood says tonight it's a grade 1 AC joint sprain for Jordan De Goey with his shoulder, so the expectation is you jab that one up and you play next week.
No-brainer then, he stays and away they go.
I would think so, yeah. I think you back yourself in and you back your own standards in to get paid a lot of money.
But one of the best games of his career on the weekend too. Yeah. He was awesome.
So what's that mean for Brodie Grundy?
So Brodie Grundy, Melbourne is the raging favourite. And the expectation is that they will get there. Now Collingwood's position is that they expect him to leave. Now if it is that he stays, that's OK. That might impact some of their other issues, trying to get the likes of McStay and Bobby Hill and Frampton in from Adelaide. Those close to him are saying he's going to win the Brownlow next year. He's so determined to play well, and yet I think all of us don't quite see how that fits in with Max Gawn, of course, having 2 goals in the last 8 games as a forward.
So, two-part question for you, Root. Collingwood don't seem to be fighting that hard to keep him. Do you think Collingwood are a better team with Brodie Grundy playing?
I think they are.
How does he go in a tandem with Max Gawn at Collingwood, and how can you win a Brownlow in that tandem?
You can't, Jace. You can't. Can they keep De Goey and Grundy on the same level?
They can, but it potentially might impact them on Bobby Hill. We'll talk about Taranto.
It seems they want the salary cap relief, don't they?
That's what it comes down to. I think there's no doubt that Brodie Grundy makes Collingwood a better team. But
he's not a priority.
But that's right. But it's the sum of all parts, because if it's De Goey, Bobby Hill and a couple of other players, you know, you've got to stack that up against Grundy.
Junior Riewoldt?
So he met with Port Adelaide today. He met with Sean Burgoyne. He had a medical there. He's getting a bigger deal at Port Adelaide, and he's getting longer years as well. Now, Channel 9 is reporting that he's actually said, I want to be at Port Adelaide. I've just spoken to his manager, John Meeson. He says it's not the case. We're going through a process. I think Port Adelaide is the very strong favourite there. The Tigers. So Trent Cotchin, a 1-year deal. Dustin Martin had his exit interview today and will stay. Tim Taranto will sign a 7-year deal. The Tigers met with Jacob Hopper today. How the hell did they get that done, you ask? So there is some speculation around that, of course, GWS want a ruckman. Ivan Soldo is someone that's been pushed down the pecking order, and that might be someone with a couple of first-rounders that might help. At North Melbourne, really strong progress with Todd Goldenstein's deal as well. I think Goldstein will stay now and needs 5 more games for 300.
Wayne Carey, this is just broken.
Yeah, that's correct. Sorry. Michael Warner from the Herald Sun is reporting tonight that North Melbourne's Carey has been banned from Crown premises for 2 years after being caught with white powder. Now, it's spilled out onto a gaming room table, so the CCTV vision confirmed that. There was an allegation that there was an admission from Wayne. It continues a pretty eventful year after a dust-up with Anthony Stevens, so that, of course, the fallout of that will process through the week.
Ralphie, we need to keep moving. Thanks for that. On the other side, we're going to have good, better, best. And actually, there wasn't much ugly for the weekend.
All positive stuff, Gaz.
All positive, and then we look forward to 2 big semi-finals, the Demons and the Brisbane Lions at the MCG, and then Freo come across to take on